Alright, welcome back to the Crabby Dice. Today we're looking at Dungeon Pets. So what's the theme to this game? It's pretty unique. We're going to be raising dungeon pets and trying to sell them to customers and having exhibitions to score extra points to show off our amazing pets. It is a worker placement game with some cool bidding mechanics. Follow along. This is going to be the setup and rules video. Click on the link below for my playthrough and my thoughts. It'll take you directly there. And before we start, please like, subscribe, and comment on my videos. That'd be great. Let's get started. Alright, put out your game board for the correct number of players. The side with the arrows is for a 2 and 3 player game. The other side's for 4 players. I'll simulate a 3-player setup. Do the exact same thing for your progress board, but this time look at the bottom left and it'll tell you which side of the board you should be playing. Alright, put out your progress marker on the number 1. That's going to keep track of our turns. And below some of the round markers, you're going to have boxes. You're going to put one of each player's imps in those boxes. Alright, we're going to grab our exhibition tiles, and you're going to put one on each of the slots above. Alright, and you're going to do the exact same thing for the customers. The tiles you don't use, you can return them to the game box. They will not be used this game. Now, depending on the variant you're playing with, you're going to flip some of these over. So if you're playing just the base game and a normal game, you'll flip over just the first one on each track. But if you want to play a more strategic game, flip the next one over. Alright, now let's look at our main game board here. So a couple of things to do is there's our main decks of cards. There's going to be 4 different colors. Shuffle them all together, leave some space above them for the discard piles. And then on the other side, put out your pets, which just look like eggs. Alright, let's set up our pet market first. So you're going to flip over 1 and set it to level 3 on the top. And the next 3 are just going to be level 2s that we're going to place at the bottom. Like so. You can tell their levels by the amount of boxes that are shown. Alright, let's fill up our cages. So we're going to have a bunch of tiles here. Give it a good shuffle. Flip over 3. And you're going to do the exact same thing for the cage add-ons. You're going to flip over 2 of them. And you can leave both of these on the side of the board because we'll be refilling them every round. Alright, same thing goes for the artifacts. You're going to take 2 of them, flip them over. And leave this next to the game board as well. There is another deck of cards, which are these potions. These are all exactly the same. You can leave them face up and put them at the hospital area here. And next we have to set up our food market here. So every round you're going to be looking at what's on the tile. So the first round it is pre-printed, and you're going to put that much food on the stalls here. So we're going to have 2 green and 2 red. In a 4-player game there will be the middle stall also filled up. Next, you're going to put out our minions. So you're going to put 1 minion of each player's color on the competition track here, and the other one on the point track. So we're all going to start at 0. We're all going to have our 50 and 100 point chit. Just leave them near the 50, so when you cross it, you'll pick up the chit. Alright, and the last thing we need to set up on the game board is the neutral color pieces. So in a 4-player game, you don't need to do this step, but if you're playing 3, some places are already covered, so that makes the game a bit tighter. So you're going to put 1 of these pieces on each spot that you see a little marker on the bottom right. So it will be here, here, and here. In a 2-player game, you'll also add another one to each of these tracks on the opposite side. So there's 6 spots, so it'll be exactly 3 away, and here there's 4 spots, so it'll be 2 away. Okay, let's go to our player boards. So you're going to give each player a player shield and a cage board. Figure out who first player is and give them this marker. Each player is going to start with 6 imps and $2. Give each player 1 of each need card type. And finally, add a poop cube to their first cage. Lastly, what I like to do is put out a Plano box with all the bits. Alternatively, you can put all the coins here and all the foods in their bin here, but I like to keep it on the side of the board. Easy access to all players. And now we're set up. Alright, welcome to the rules overview for Dungeon Pets. So, at a high level, what kind of game is this? Well, it's a 2-parter. It's part worker placement, where we're going to be placing our workers to get pets, cages, add-ons, artifacts, food, so on and so on. But it's also part bidding, because the biggest groups of workers and money will actually place their workers first on the game board, right? So it's part bidding and part worker placement. Alright, the game is only going to last 6 rounds in a 2 and 3 player game, and 5 rounds in a 4-player game that's on the other side of the board. Okay, in each of those rounds, you're going to be following the same 6 phases. Some of those phases are resetting, we'll be shopping, which is sending out our workers, aging our pets, and talking to customers, and showing off at the show, and so on and so on. So I'm going to go into each of those 6 phases in order and explain to you in detail how to play the game, and then we'll come back for the end game scoring at the end. Alright, phase 1 is a setup / reset kind of phase. Alright, so the first thing you're going to deal with is the money. So in a 4-player game, the first 2 players are going to get a coin, and the last 2 players are going to get 2 coins. Alright, but in a 2 and 3 player game, the first player is going to get 1 coin, and every other player is going to get 2 coins. Alright, that's the only thing you need to do during the first round of the game. Every other round, just follow these additional steps. Alright, the next customer and exhibition tile are going to get flipped over. If they're already all flipped over, just skip this step. Alright, now only in a 2 and 3 player game, all the neutral imps on the game board are going to advance 1 space. Just follow the arrows. It's going to move there, it's going to move there, it's going to move there. Alright, next let's update the food stands. So what you're going to do is look at the progress board here and the marker, and the tile underneath it will tell you how much food go into each stand. Alright, so in this example there'll be 1 vegetable, 3 and 1 here in the middle mixed, and 1 meat. If those food already on the board, just leave them there, they will accumulate. Now before I advance any further, there are some extra rules if you're playing 2 and 3 players. If the neutral imp is on any of the stands, he's going to buy all the food that is currently there. And there will be no food that will show up there for the rest of the round, for example like this. And if the neutral imp was on the little squares, so either the little red one or the little green one here, he's going to steal 1 of that type of food from the mixed stand here. So if he was here, he'll steal 1 vegetable from the mixed stand. Alright, next let's update everything else on the board. So for the cages, there'll be between 1 and 3 cages left. What you're going to do is remove all the cages except for the lowest one and slide them to the top. So in this example, we're going to slide the bottommost one to the top, and you remove these from the game. And then just refill with 2 more. Alright, you'll do the exact same thing for the cage add-ons here. So if there's only 1, slide it up, and then if there was 2, remove the top one from the game and replace it with a new one. Alright, some extra rules again for just 2 and 3 players. If the neutral imp was at the add-on space, you're going to not refill the bottommost spot. And the same thing for the cages. If the imp is on the cage space over here, you won't fill up the bottommost cage. So in this example, this one will not appear. Alright, next let's deal with our pets. So any pet that is currently on the level 3 or H3 is going to get removed from the game and go to the farm. I'm not going to explain you the thematic sense, but you are going to add 1 meat to the meat stand when that happens. Every other animal or pet that's in the bottom row is going to age and slide up. So they're all going to age to level 3. And then you will refill with more level 2s on the bottom row. Again, some added rules for 2 and 3 players. If the neutral imp is at the age 3 spot here, he's going to buy the leftmost animal. And same thing, if he's on the level 2 pet space here, you won't refill the leftmost space. So there'll only be 2 available. Alright, and lastly, there's the artifacts. If somebody had taken some artifacts, just there will be none left, so we'll refill with 2 more. And if nobody had taken them, just remove those 2 from the game and add 2 more from the general supply. If the imp is on that space, another rule for 2 and 3 players, you just don't refill them, you leave them empty. Like that. And there you go, we're set up. Let's go to phase 2. Alright, phase 2 is going to be the meat and potatoes of the game, right? So this is where we're going to be creating our imp groups and sending out our workers on the game board to do the actions. Alright, so first let's do our imp groups. So we'll go to our player board section here. And we all have a shield, and we're going to raise it up and create our imp groups. So you can create at most 6 groups of imps, and each group has to have at least 1 imp. What I like to do is always put your biggest group to the left and work your way down to the right. You are allowed to have multiple groups with the same amount. So for example, I could have 2 groups of 2 if I like. Now, when everyone's ready, everyone's going to put their shield down and display what their groups are. What I like to do is first player is going to start with let's say a large number like 7 and say, does anyone have a group of 7? If so, they would go first, and then you'd work your way down. So then 6, then 5, then 4, then 3, 2, and 1. All right, so that's how you take turns placing on your board. It's always the biggest groups are gonna decide what they want first and working your way down. So bigger groups, you might have less actions, but you'll go first. Whereas smaller groups, you might have more groups, but you go later in turn order. All right, now what's gonna happen if multiple groups have the same number of groupings? So that's where you're gonna follow turn order. First player always goes first. All right, so in this example, let's say first and second player both had groupings of 4. First player is gonna put their group out first, and then second player is gonna go. Now, what's gonna happen is when you have to resolve and the same player has multiple of the same number, you never take 2 turns in a row. You're gonna resolve 1, go to the next player, he's gonna resolve his grouping of, let's say 2, and then you'll return back to player 1 where he will resolve his second of that number. All right, and that's sort of how the turn structure works in this game. All right, now let's talk about all the actions on the board. All right, before I start talking about any of the actions, if you send a grouping to an action space with money, the money gets discarded straight into the bank. All right, so you don't keep any money whether you needed money for the action or not. All right, so the first action spaces we're going to talk about are the food stands. So if you send your grouping to either of the 3 food stands, you'll just collect the food that's there. So the green will give you the vegetables, the mix will give you the mixed food over here, and the red will give you the meat that's here. Now in this game, whenever you collect food, very important, you're going to go to your player board here on the bottom left and place them in their respective spots. So the meat's going to go in the far left corner here, and the vegetables are going to go on the left hand side over here. All right. Now, let's talk about the artifact space. If you send a grouping to the artifact space, you're going to take both artifacts and add them to your player board on the bottom right here. All right, let's talk about the sections on the left here. So, for the cages, and only the cages, you need at least a grouping with 2 imps to grab a cage because they're heavy. Right, so if you send a grouping to a cage, you're going to take one of the available cages and add them to your player board. So you have your board section here, so any of the free spots, you're going to add your cage. In future rounds, you can actually replace the cage you have there or replace your base cage that's printed on the board. The add-ons work the exact same way. If you send your grouping to the add-on section here, you'll take whichever add-on you want and add it to your player board. Just a note here, the add-ons on the top affect the cages at the bottom here, and the 2 add-ons here affect the cages that are going to be here later on in the game. Alright, let's talk about purchasing pets. So, cages needed 2 workers and pets need at least 1 coin because pets are expensive. So, if you send your grouping to one of the 3 pet spaces, the 2 bottom ones are to purchase a level 2 pet here, and the top one here is to purchase a level 3 pet here. Take the pet of your choice and add it to your player board. I would suggest to have a cage ready by the end of the round or you're going to lose that pet for no reason. Okay. And the top space is to take one of those 3. Alright, now we'll talk about all these action spaces on the bottom right here. So the yellow space here is recruiting family members. So the way that works is you're going to look at the current progress marker. So let's say right now it's on number 4, and you're going to take all your family members from that round working back to the beginning of the game. So in this example, red would take these 3 and add them to his grouping here. At the end of the round, all those workers are going to end up back on his player board. Alright, let's talk about the hospital space right next to it. It sort of works the same way. If any imps were sent to the hospital because they got hurt, you're going to stand them up and add them to the same grouping. You'll also, as a second bonus action, pick up one of these potions, and these act like a wild card, and I'll explain that in the next phase. Alright, the last 2 spaces down here. This is a simple exhibition bonus. You're just going to take your minion and add 2 to his value. And lastly, there's the stand over here. So this works in a very specific way. I'm going to talk about this during, I believe, phase 5 or 6. And this is where you can get a bonus by selling your pets. All you really need to know about this space is at the end of the round, they do not get returned to you. They're just going to slide over onto the stand over here. So it's very important to know that so you don't send a gigantic grouping if you don't intend on selling a pet. and I'll explain again that in a future phase. Alright, phase 3 is the assigning need cards to your pets. Alright, so the symbols will not make any sense until you get to phase 4, but I'll show you how to assign these to the pet, and then during the real game you can decide which symbols assigned to which pets. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to look at all your pets and draw cards equal to all the colored notches below them. So in this scenario I'm going to draw 1 yellow, 1 red, and 2 green cards. You're going to add all those cards to your hand. Right? And now you have to assign these cards to your pets. So again, the symbols will not make any sense, but you have to assign 2 green cards to this pet. So let's say I assign these 2. And for this one I need to assign a yellow and a red. So let's say I would assign these 2. Now just a couple of notes. Make sure to play with the cards right side up, because there is a variant where you can play a harder game where there's a double symbol on the underside. But if you're not playing with that variant, make sure all the cards are played the exact same way and none of them have a double symbol. Alright, phase 4 is called the show off phase. You're going to be doing 2 things. First, you're going to resolve all those cards you assigned to your animals in the previous phase. And the second thing is you're going to resolve the current exhibition that the current round is pointing to. Alright, you don't have that in the first round of the game. Alright, so let's talk about the resolving of the cards first. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at your shield here and you're going to resolve all the cards in this exact order. Alright, so let's look at the cards we have assigned to our animals and do that. Alright, so the first icon you want to look for are the food icons. So you're going to look at all the cards on all the pets that you've assigned and look for food icons, and that means you have to feed that pet. The only food that that pet wants to eat is what's written in the bottom right of the token. Alright, so this one only wants vegetables, this one can take either, this one can take either, and other of them are carnivores that can only eat meat. You're going to take those resources from your player board on the bottom right over here. Alright, now as you can see here, if you don't have the food to feed him, you're going to cause suffering. So for every food that you can't feed, you're going to take a suffering cube and add it to the animal. Now I'll mention it now, if at any point the amount of suffering on the animal equals his age or level, then that animal perishes and you sort of lose him. Alright, so very important. Alright, next let's talk about the poop. Poop is the easiest thing to sort of gauge. You're just going to add a poop cube to the pen that he's in. So you're going to look for poop icons and add poop to the pen. Alright, that's these brown cubes and you're just going to add it to the pen. Now, for a lot of these things that we need to resolve, you need to also look at the pen and some add-ons that are on the board. Some of them, like this one here, already satisfies a poop need. So you don't need to add a poop icon to this pen, but if this icon was not there, you take a poop icon and just add it to the pen. Alright. Next is the play symbol. For this one we have to assign an imp to go play with the animals. Alright. So for example here, this animal wants to be played with and this one wants to be played with. Now the beauty of assigning an imp to go play with the animal is he goes into these white spaces between the pen, so he can actually play with 2 animals at the same time. So let's say he goes there, he plays with him to satisfy this play, and he plays with him to satisfy this play. Again, he did not have to play with him because he already has a play time satisfied, but let's just say there was 2 play icons on this side, then one of them would be satisfied with the icon and the other one would be satisfied by the imp. Now for every play icon that you can't satisfy, so you would have to have multiple imps around him to play with the animal, you'd cause a suffering, as you can see. Alright, so if you needed 3 play icons but you only assigned 1 imp, you would have 2 suffering to be placed on the animal. Alright, next we're going to look at magic and anger. They sort of work in the same way. Alright, let's look at magic first. For magic, you're going to look at the actual cage or pen that the animal is in. Alright, so for example, this animal has a magical requirement and the pen is 0. Alright, if the pen is equal to or greater than his need, then it's fine, you just move on. Alright, but in this example, if it's more than the pen can handle, he's going to develop a mutation. So for every magical requirement that he needs above the pen, you're going to cause a mutation. You're going to take one of these mutation icons and put it on the pen, on the animal. Alright, you're going to see here in the top right that if at any point an animal has 2 mutations, you're going to lose the animal. Okay. Anger works the exact same way. You're going to compare it instead of to the right to the left, which is the red number. All right. So if the pen is equal to or greater than the need of the animal, the amount of cards, then you satisfy it, you move on. All right. But if the amount of cards is greater than the number value there, then you're going to have to use imps from your burrow to fight the animal back into his cage. So to do that, let's say you were missing 2. You take 2 imps that you had in your burrow and send them to the hospital because they had to fight the animal back into his cage. As we saw from the action phase before, in the following rounds you can put a character here to recoup all these guys back at the end of the following round. Right? Now, if you didn't have imps in your burrow to equal that value, then he would run away, just like the 2 mutations on an animal. Alright, the last thing to talk about is the disease. So the disease works hand in hand with poop icons. So for example, let's say it was like this. So what you do is you add up all the disease and all the poop icons together. So for example, right now it's only 1 plus 0, it's 1. Alright, if the value is 2 or less, nothing happens, move on. If the value is more than 2, you need to add suffering to the animal, and that value is going to be equal to that total minus 1. So for example, if the total of poop and disease for this animal was 4, you would add 3 suffering to that animal. If it was 5, you'd add 4 suffering to the animal. If it was 6, you'd add 5, and so on and so on and so on. If it was 3, you'd add 2 suffering to that animal. And remember, if the suffering equals his level, then he would perish and he'd leave. Alright, the last one is the wild potion card. So during phase 3, instead of assigning a color, you could assign a potion to the animal. So for example, this one would have caused a mutation on this animal. So instead of playing this purple card, you can play a potion instead. It just stands as a wild and it's automatically satisfied card, right? Now the only requirement for doing this is you still need to discard this purple card when you play the potion. And that's it. Now I talked a lot about losing animals. I'm just going to explain to you what happens when you lose an animal, right? So at any point when you lose an animal, you're going to lose 1 point for every 10 points you have on the track. Alright, so if you're below 10, you won't lose any points. But let's say you're at 15 points, you'll lose a point. If you're at 25, you'll lose 2 points. 35, you'll lose 3 points. So on and so on and so on, you get the idea. Alright, now let's talk about exhibitions. Alright, for that you're going to look at the current round and take the tile associated with it. And we're going to score this tile. So when you're looking at an exhibition tile, you're going to take something into account, which is the top left. This is going to tell you if you can count all your pets on your board or if you have to pick one specific pet. So I'm just going to take this tile for an example and we're going to count all our pets. So the way you score this is you're going to gain positive points for everything in the top right and you're going to get negative points for everything in the dark square over here. Alright, so I'll just show you with an example. So on my board here, I have 2 yarn cards. So I'm going to score 4 positive points because of my yarn, but I'm going to lose points for every poop and 2 for every mutation. So thankfully I have no poop, but I do have a mutation on this guy, let's just say. So it's going to be 4 minus 2, so my total is 2. I'm going to move myself up twice on the track here. Alright, everyone's going to do that and we're all going to calculate our points. Let's just say it ended like this. And then you're going to score. So the score is written up here. So this is a 3-player game and this is a 2-player game. A couple of things to keep in mind. If there are any ties, you're going to score the same amount of points minus 1 for every tied player there. So for example, this would be 7 points and each of these players would score 3 points each because there's 1 extra guy tied with them. All right. Also, if you don't make it past 0, so at least at 1, you're not going to score any points even though 3rd place scores 2. You need to score at least 1 positive point to score points. And then you're going to go up the track. After you score, just set your minions back and toss this back in the game box. Alright, phase 5 is the business phase where we're going to be trying to sell our pets to the customers on the board. Alright, so this is not going to happen the first 2 rounds in the game, but every single round after that, there's always a customer waiting at the current progress marker, right? So for this round, let's just say this customer wants to buy a pet. Now, some rules. He wants to buy at most 1 pet per player. So even if you have 3 pets that you want to sell, he's only interested in buying 1. Okay? And you're never forced to sell a pet. So if you have 2 and you don't really want to sell to him because you won't score that many points, you're not forced to sell a pet to a customer. Alright? And these score the exact same way as the exhibitions. Alright? So you have the top part here, which is a positive value. So you're going to take one of your pets, calculate his positive value, take his negative value into account, find the difference, and you're going to score 2 times that difference. Now, just as a reminder, in the bottom right of the board over here, there's a ×2, and that's what it stands for. Alright, so just as an example, let's say I want to sell this pet, and let's say that I calculated this and it was 5, then I would score 10 points, and I would discard this guy from the game because I sold it to this customer. Alright, I'd score, and there you go. Now, after you sell a pet, very important, you're always going to get the coins that are depicted on the little track here. So I would take that much from the general supply or from the bank here and put it on my player board. Another option you have is if you have imps at the platform over here, you could return 1 imp to the pen where you're selling the animal. So let's say the animal was in this pen, you could return this imp to that pen. And now you'll score 3 times instead of 2 times his value. As a reminder, there's a ×3 marker right over here. Alright, so let's say you calculated it was 5, instead of scoring 10, you'll score 15 points. Again, you'll get the gold, and then you'll discard him from the game. Alright, once everyone's sold to this customer, you can basically just remove this tile from the game. At the end of this phase, you're going to do 2 more things. You're going to take all the cards that were assigned to your animals and basically toss them into their respective discard piles. And lastly, for every imp you still have in your burrow, you can do one of 2 things. You can clear poop from pens, or you can get money from the bank. So let's say I had 3 imps left over and I had no poop on my pens or cages. I can go and get 3 gold from the general supply and put it into my my personal supply. And that's it for this phase. Alright, phase 6 is the aging phase. Alright, so you're going to do 3 things. First, you're going to age your pets. Alright, so you're going to go look at your pens, and for each pet, you're going to look at the little window on the right here, and it's going to tell you how many times you need to spin the wheel. Alright, so usually if they're older than 4, it's only 1 time. So you're going to spin your wheel and show 1 more square. Alright, so for the very young ones, it's always going to have a 2. You're going to spin it twice. There you go. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to spoil your food. So you're going to look at your bottom left corner of your player board here. So any meat or vegetables that you had here are going to slide over and they're going to spoil, which means return them back to the general supply. Any vegetables you have here is fine. You just slide it over and it'll be in this spot right here. So the following turn, if you don't use it, it'll spoil by shifting over to the right. And lastly, what you're going to do is return all your imps back home. So any imps you currently have on your cage board get returned back to the home space or your burrow. And any imp that you have on worker placement spots get returned as well. The only imps that don't get returned are the ones that are currently in the hospital and the ones that are on the platform. Alright, everything else gets returned. And you're ready for the following round. Alright, let's talk a bit about the end of round / end of game stuff. Alright, so after you finished all 6 phases, what you're going to do is you're going to move the marker over. Alright, whenever you move the marker, if you look at the little happy face there, that just stands for the first player token over here, and the arrow underneath it means pass it on to the next player. Alright, on the 4-player side, there is a question mark on one of them. That just means give it to the player that's currently in last place on the points track. Alright, now, if this marker hits the skeleton hand over here, that's triggered the end game. And then you're going to score the final points. Alright, and in the end, you're going to score 2 more exhibitions. Alright, that's where you're going to score this bottom track 2 more times, and then you're going to figure out the winner. Alright, so let's talk about both of these. The top one's called Business Acumen, and you're going to get 1 track point here for every 2 gold, and you're going to get 1 point for every food you may have left over at the end of the game, for every potion, and for every artifact that you gathered. You're also going to minus 2 points, track points, for each imp that's still on the board. Those are the ones in the hospital, the ones on the platform, and the ones that you still haven't gathered from the progress board. All right, figure out where you are on this track and score just like every other exhibition. Reset it back to 0. Do the same thing for the second one, which is 2 track points per pet you had, 1 track point for each cage and cage add-on that you got during the game, including the pre-printed one, and -1 for each mutation, suffering, and poop cube left on your cage board. All right, again, figure out where you're on the track, score just like you would every other exhibition, and that's the end of the game. So whoever's the highest point total at that point won the game. They're happy, everyone else is a bit sad, and that's how you play. Click on the link below to go to my playthrough. If not, we'll see you in the next game. Later.